The purpose of this lesson is to learn what responsive design is, how to include one item in multiple classes, and how to use different media options to apply style sheets for different uses. For this lesson, I created a new HTML document called Responsive Design, which is just simply, once again, a copy of my template.html. I added a link to index.html, and I changed the title and the H1 in the header for this particular document, and everything else is still blank. So if I look at this in my browser, you will notice that it's just simply a blank document. Now, if you notice, I am using Firefox this time because I want to start showing you some developer tools that are available to us to try to troubleshoot our CSS and also look at other design elements. So far, what we have played with in all of our documents is just simply one document that has CSS styles applied to all of the elements, and everybody is going to see it the same way. The problem is that we are going to have different users using different platforms looking at our website. I may have somebody that's on an iPhone, somebody that's on Android, somebody that has a 10-inch tablet, somebody that's looking at it on a full desktop, somebody that may have a very large screen. And depending on the type of media that's being used to display the page should dictate how the page gets displayed to the user. If you think about your favorite website, a lot of times they will have a mobile version of the website, they will have a desktop version of the website, and sometimes they will ask you to actually select which one that you want. With responsive design, we don't have to ask them for a different version, and on top of that, there is only one version of the website. It just simply gets formatted differently depending on what kind of device they are using to look at the page. Before we get started with the responsive design, I need to show to you how to apply multiple classes to the same object. So what I want to do is I'm going to make a paragraph that I want it to have a red font and a green background. And what I did before is I would actually assign that to all of my paragraph tags. Well, I may not necessarily want it applied to all of my paragraphs. I may only want it applied to some. And if I do something like a name, using an ID, then I can only apply this style to one particular element. So if I want to do this to multiple elements, I'm going to use a class. So I'm going to make a class called red. And my red class contains these elements where the color of the text is going to be red. I'm going to make a second class called green, and this has attributes where the background color is green. All right, so I showed to you before how I can use that to style particular elements, so that way any element that belongs to that class will inherit those attributes. So I'm going to make a paragraph that is a member of the red class. So I'm going to say its class is equal to red. And this is my red paragraph. Close the paragraph, and when I come over here and refresh, you'll see that the text is red because it inherited the color being red. Okay, the next one, I'm going to say that the class is equal to green, and this is my green paragraph. And when I refresh, now I get a second paragraph that has a green background. But what if I want both of those applied to the same paragraph? What I can do is I can actually string together the classes that this element belongs to by simply saying the class is equal to red space green. This is my red and green paragraph. And so now what that does is it strings together that this belongs to the red class and to the green class, and therefore it will inherit the properties from both of those classes. So if I just specify red, I get red text. If I specify green, I get a green background. If I specify red and green, I get the red text with the green background. All I'm doing is simply stringing together different classes so that way it can inherit the attributes from each class. Let's say I have an element that I don't want to appear on the screen. I want to get rid of the element. What I can do is I can define another class, and in this case I'm going to call it no-show. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set its display property to none. And what this will do is it will tell it that this particular item should not be displayed on the page. So I'm going to take this middle paragraph here, the one that is green, and I'm also going to make it a member of no show. So when I save and come over here and refresh, what you'll notice is the second paragraph will go away. Now it is still behind the scenes, it is in the code, but it will not actually get displayed. And this is going to be the premise for us being able to print things out and allowing users to just simply print the actual body of our document without displaying all of the other stuff that's around the page. So if I have a page that has links across the top, it has our header, it has links down the side, advertisements on the right side, and I want the user to be able to print things out, then what I can do is I can specify that this particular element should not be displayed. And we will work our way there because we're actually going to go through different media forms, and a printed out version of our website can be styled differently than one that would display on the screen. The premise for responsive design is going to be that I have multiple style sheets that get applied based on what screen or what media the user is using to look at my site. So what I am going to do is I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call this styles, and then I'm going to put my CSS styles in here. Now what I am going to do is I'm going to make a new text document called screen.css. I will make one called print.css. And another one called mobile.css. And what I want to do is I want to create these as my style sheets that if somebody is looking at my website on a mobile device, it will use the mobile.css format. If they come in and look at it on a regular computer screen, they'll get the screen.css style sheet. If they try to print out the site, it will use the print.css. Now for this to work, I have to not use embedded or inline styles. I want to just strictly use IDs and classes for all of my elements on the page, and I want my styles to be outside of my document. Instead, I want them to be in these external style sheets. So what I am going to do is I'm going to take all of my styles out of here, I'm going to cut those, and I'm going to paste them into screen.css. Now the problem is it has these extra spaces in it. I am going to get rid of these because this does seem to cause some issues with some of the browsers, especially if they're tabs. So I'm going to get rid of all these. Okay, so here is my screen.css file. Now, screen.css is the one that is going to be used if they look at my website from a computer screen, not a mobile phone and not printed out. I no longer need my embedded style, and instead I am going to link to my style sheet. Okay, so its relation is that it is a style sheet. It has an href, which is going to be styles/screen.css. And then the last thing that I'm going to put is media. And by media, I'm telling it what kind of media is going to be used to display this style sheet. And I'm going to tell it that if they are looking at my site from a screen, then we are going to use this style sheet. This is the default style that's going to be used. We also have the ability to use a print and a mobile style sheet. So I'm going to go ahead and add those a while. So I have link relation is that it is a style sheet. Its location is styles/print.css. Its media is going to be equal to print, because this is something that's going to be printed out. And then the last one is going to be for our mobile devices. Now they're actually called handhelds. So once again, it's a link. Its relationship is a style sheet. Its location is styles/mobile.css. Its media is handheld. And there we go. So now what I have done is I have told it that if you're using a computer screen, use this link. If you're using something to print it out, use this link. And if it's a handheld, use this link. All right, so save that, refresh, and it looks the same. And the reason for it is I am on a computer screen, therefore it is using screen.css, which has our elements in it. So as far as this document is concerned, it doesn't look any different because it's just simply pulling it in from the external style sheet. I want to show something to you, which is right now I'm looking at this on the screen, and you can see that this is red. This has the green background with the red text on it. And what I am going to do is I'm going to come up here to print it. And what this is a print preview. If you notice, what actually happens is none of this is formatted now. And the reason that none of it is formatted is because I've put nothing in the print.css file. It's blank. And I have told it that if I am printing it, use this style sheet called print.css. Because print.css is blank, this is also going to be blank. Not blank, but not formatted, because there's no formatting that's applied to it. So to show you what will happen, I am going to add some CSS elements to print.css. And what I'm going to do is it's still going to be .red because that is my class. And how do I want these formatted? Okay, now the red ones on the screen are formatted as red. And the thing is that maybe this was supposed to be emphasis. And I know that people are going to be printing this with a black and white printer. So I want to use color sparingly for a printer. I typically want all of the text to be black. But maybe I want to make it stand out just a little bit. So what I'm going to do is instead of changing its color to red, I'm going to do something more like font weight and make it bold. That way it still stands out when we print it out on a black and white printer. Otherwise, red actually prints out a little bit lighter on a black and white printer. Okay, so save this. Now I have to refresh my page over here to get the change. And then when I go to print, now you will see that my paragraphs that are red, which is the first one and the third one, those are now bold. And the reason that they are bold is because out of print.css, it picked up this as the CSS elements. All right, and conversely, if I want to do the green, I'm going to do green. And this one, maybe we make its font size is 1.2M. Come over here, I got to get out of the print preview. I need to refresh the page and then do print again. And there's my green paragraph that is larger sizes. So now this one is just red, which is strictly bold. This one is green, which is strictly 1.2M. This one is red and green, therefore it is bold and 1.2M. So what I am doing is I am applying a style that will only affect the printer. It will not affect what happens on the screen. This is the basis for responsive design. One thing I forgot to mention to you is if you look right here on the screen, we only have the red paragraph and the red and green paragraph. And if you remember back under screen.css, we hid anything that is no-show. And our second paragraph was no-show. So the one that is just strictly the green paragraph does not show up on the screen. But when I print, the green paragraph does show because under print.css, we have not hidden it. This is actually backwards from what we normally want to do. We usually want things to show up on the screen, but then when we print them out, then we want to hide things that shouldn't be printed. But it does show you that these do affect different paragraphs differently because of what class they belong to. The next thing that I want to show to you is what happens for mobile devices. Now my mobile devices I want to handle a little bit differently. I usually want to use some sort of darker color with lighter colored text. That usually works out better on a mobile device. So what I'm going to do with my mobile.css is I'm going to change it so that its body has tags such as a background color of 333333, and I want to set the foreground color to an almost white color, so something like this. And I want to make sure that the font is set to Arial or sans serif. So we're going to say font family is Arial, and if I don't have Arial, then sans serif. Okay, so now I have in my CSS designated what happens when it's a mobile device, and in my document I specified that if this device is a handheld, that it should display it with a dark color background. This should work. Okay, so what I want to show to you, and the reason that I'm using Firefox is because we have what is called developer mode. And I'm going to go to developer mode, and I want to toggle the tools. And so now what I can do is I can set this so that it will display what is called the responsive design mode. And essentially what this is going to do is show me what it would look like if this were a mobile device. Okay, so I'm going to click this, and if you notice, it didn't change. Here's the reason why. This handheld, most of our browsers will ignore it because things like our iPhone, Android devices, they don't technically believe that they're handheld devices. And what the intention is to prevent you from seeing a mobile website for certain websites that you should be seeing the full site. There are some websites out there that will try to force you into seeing their mobile version and won't allow you to see the full desktop version, even though my iPhone, Android phone, Android tablet, iPad, any of those can handle a full-size website. So instead of saying handheld, we're going to change this. And the way that we're going to change this is we're going to say that the media is only the screen and a max width of a certain amount. Now my iPhone is, if you notice, this is 320 pixels wide, and the iPhone can easily be 480 pixels wide. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that if the phone is no more than 480 pixels wide, I want it to show this design. So I'm going to say 480 pixels. And so now we're going to format it like this. So now what happens is when I come over here and refresh my page, now I get the new style. So what happens is, like I said, my browser on the phone doesn't technically believe that it's a handheld. It believes that it is a full-size web browser. It just happens to have a smaller screen. So by doing it this way, we tell it if it's the screen and if the width is no wider than 480 pixels, then we get this. So now if I take my size and change it, so if I go 360 pixels wide, it still works. If I go to 768 by 1024, it goes back to the regular screen style. We're only going to get that smaller one if the screen size is less than 480 pixels. Notice I'm not changing anything in my HTML. I'm strictly swapping out which CSS style sheet should be applied. And the way that it's deciding that is on the maximum width of the screen. One thing that you will notice, though, is because it is still a screen as far as the browser is concerned on my mobile device, it is going to inherit the screen and the link for the one that is screen and max width of 480. So if you notice, this one still has this first paragraph formatted as red, which is specified under screen.css. The green and red one is set to a green background and a red color. And the second paragraph is set as no show, so that one does not get displayed. That comes out of screen.css. Then it comes down and says, okay, well, this belongs to screen and the width is less than 480, so it also should use mobile.css, and that changes the background color, the text color, and then the font family. So what I'm doing is I'm actually combining two style sheets together for my mobile device. I have a couple of different types of media that I can use. So far I've played with the media as the screen, print, and then only the screen, and if it's this maximum width. I have a minimum width that I can play with. I can have a minimum height, maximum height. I can have a difference in orientation depending on if it's a portrait or landscape orientation. Or the other option that I have is this one here where it says screen. I could change that to all. And what that is, if I say media equals all, it's the same as me making a style sheet without declaring what media it is. So if I want the style sheet to apply to no matter what type of device I have, then I'm going to make a media equals all, put everything in there that they all should get, and then only specify individual things that should change based on the device that I'm using. All right, so what I have done is I've gone back and I just simply modified the text here. So I wanted to include a picture and some text on this page and some links. Now these are fake links. They're not going to go anywhere, but at least you can see what they look like. I've gone through all of my CSS files and removed everything. And I did also create an all.css just so that I can apply a CSS page to everybody. So I'm going to add a link for that one here. Remember, the all one will get applied to everybody regardless of what media format they have. Okay, so now I have a style sheet that will get applied to every page regardless of what media format they have selected. So since this is set to all, I want all of my pages, regardless of what platform they're on, to use a specific font and background color. So I'm going to state that my body for all of the pages is going to be formatted with the background color is going to be almost white. I want it to be just an off-white. I want my font family to be Arial and sans serif if I don't have Arial installed. And now when I come over here and refresh, I now get an off-white color and everything is now Arial. All right, so I haven't affected anything as far as just simply looking at the page. If I look at it on a mobile phone, if I look at it on a tablet, if I print it, they're all going to have the same format. So if I come up here and I go to print, you will see that it is still set as Arial. If I go to my developer mode to responsive design, it's still Arial because all means no matter what the media format is, it still gets that style. All right, but I really don't want somebody to print this page out as this off-white, almost gray color. What I want them to do instead is when they print it, I want the background color to be white, pure white. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to override this all in my print.css. And remember, we talked about this before, that the order of these matters. So if you notice, all gets applied first, and then screen will override all, print will override all, and then mobile will override screen and all, because mobile is also screen and the max width. So the order of those matters. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to state that if you print it, we're going to override the body. And when I print it, I want the background color to be white. And I also want the color of all of the text to be black, which it is already, but I just want to make sure that it all becomes black. Now the thing is, I haven't done anything with my anchor tags. We will play with those here in just a minute. So I'm going to refresh my page, print it, and you will see that it now tries to print everything with a white background instead of the gray background. So I can override whatever's in the all by specifying that particular element in the actual CSS for the print. What my goal of this document is that if the page is full-size browser, I want to have a 2-column layout. If the page is displayed on a device that's between 480 pixels and 1024 pixels, I want the links to appear up here, but I want them to be in line. If the page shows up on a mobile device, less than 480 pixels, I want the links to display up here like they are, but I want to style them so that they look nicer. And if it's on a mobile device, I don't want this picture to display because users that go to my site will have to wait for the picture to download, and it provides no additional benefit to them aside from using up their data. All right, so just like we did before, I want to make this the two-column layout when it is on a full-size screen. So I'm going to do my nav, and I also want to format my content div. Okay, so my nav is going to be floated to the left, and it's going to have a width of 100 pixels. My content is going to go to the right, and to do that, I don't want it to wrap around my nav, so I need to set the margin left to something like 110 pixels. So then when I come over here and refresh, now I get a two-column layout. All right, so I have my links that are here. I also want to fix my links, so we're going to fix that here in just a second. But what I want to do first is we're going to take this image and float that over to the right. Now, the image does not have a name, so I'm going to give it an ID. And so we're going to say the image source ID equals tree. And so now if we come up here to screen, we can go tree, and the tree is formatted float right. And there we go. All right, so now my image here, I want to give it a little bit of a border around it, so I'm going to do padding left is 10 pixels, and just in case, padding bottom will be 10 pixels. So now we kind of push it away from the text a little bit. So now what we have is this nice two-column layout. Now if you notice, my footer is still across the bottom here. My H1 is still across the top because this is in my header. And it's just strictly the nav and the content div that are side by side. All right, so if I'm printing this out, it should still print the same way that it was before. So if I go to print, notice it's still in the same layout that it was before. But if I print this, I don't really want these links up here. So I'm going to hide the links. The way that I'm going to do that is I know that in my body I have a nav, and I just simply don't want to display it. So I'm going to say nav, and it keeps changing that to navy, so ignore that. Okay, so my nav is going to be display none. Save this, refresh, go to print, and there we go. Now our nav section is gone, and we only get the body of the document. So instead of them printing out links that do them no good when you print something out, we can just simply hide them when they print it and just get the information that they actually need to have on the page. My mobile site I want to change a little bit also. So I'm going to switch back to my responsive design mode, and you'll see that my links are actually underneath of my picture here, and I don't want that. So what I want to do is I don't want my nav to be floated at all. I want my nav to be up above. So I'm going to set this back to nav as no float. So I'm going to say float none. Okay, and when I come over here and refresh, now I get the links above the picture. But what I have now is I have this image that's here that I don't want to have. So we can hide that. We can say tree, and the tree's display is none. Okay, refresh the page. Now that's gone, but if you notice, we still have this text is way over here because back in the screen we set its margin left to 110 pixels. Well, what we want to do is we don't want to set its margin. We want to get rid of the margin. And I have a couple of options. I can set the margin to none, which would put the margin tight against the side. I don't want that. I can set the margin to auto, which may or may not work right. But instead what I want to do is I want the margin to inherit from the parent container object, which is the browser window. So I'm going to say content and its margin we are going to inherit from the parent. And so now if I come back over here and refresh, there we go. Okay, so now my nav section is also, it has a width, and I want to get rid of that width. I can get rid of the width the same way I got rid of the margin here. So I can just simply say that its width is inherit. It gets the width from the parent object, save it, and refresh, and now I get links like this. So we're starting to get a page that shows up just fine on the browser in a responsive design and for also our printed design. So we're starting to just make it different sizes depending on what kind of browser window we're in. Okay, so now my maximum width was 480. So if I try this at 768, you notice I get the 2-column layout back. And then if I go back to 360, it'll be like that. If I go back to 320, it'll be like this. So the idea here is that I'm building it where I can show things and not show things based on the type of display that we have. I want to play with making the unordered list look nicer, so let's go ahead and fix that. And I want to get rid of the bullets, so I'm going to make my UL have a list style type of none, and then that gets rid of my bullets. And that will get rid of the bullets on all of the sheets because, or I mean all of the web pages, because the all.css is where that comes from. If you notice, my links are still shoved over to the side, and I want to get rid of that. That's actually going to be the padding that is here. And so I'm going to change the padding left to inherit from the parent container object. And then when I refresh, now I get links that are on the side. And that will also affect my, my web page for my mobile devices. When I go back to print, they're not there. So you'll notice that I'm just simply changing these based on what kind of device we are looking at. And one thing that I want to fix is, right now I just listed all ULs, which means if I actually used an unordered list somewhere else on the page, it would also inherit this. So I want to clarify that it should be the nav UL. And then I also want to make these look a little bit different. So what I'm going to do is, if I have a nav LI that also happens to be an anchor tag, then I want it to be formatted this way. I'm going to say the color is going to be black. Okay, so come over here and refresh. Now they're all black. All right, so I want to somehow give this a manner to, if I hover over top of it, so I'm going to use my pseudo classes. If it's a nav and it's in an LI that is an anchor that happens to be hovered, then we're going to do something like underline it. So I'm going to make the text decoration underline. Now this obviously won't work for mobile devices because we can't hover in a mobile device, but it's okay here because the mobile devices just won't see it. So I'm going to set the text decoration to none for when it's not being hovered. And so now when I hover over these, then I will actually get these. Now if I'm in my responsive mode here, they are going to underline in here because I have a mouse. But if I'm on a touch device, you're not going to have a mouse, so you will not see those underline like that. I want to play with my mobile design just a little bit. I want to give some sort of visual clues that these are links up here. So for my mobile design, I'm going to modify that if it's in the nav section and it's an LI, that I want these to be displayed as a block level element. And these are going to be block level elements, so I'm going to put a border around it of 1 pixel solid black. And then now when I refresh, now you will see that these actually are in a block element. All right, so I want to make these a little bit taller. I can do something like height and make it 20 pixels tall. Maybe make it a little bit bigger. There you go. So 50 pixels now is enough to see it. So what I'm starting to do is I'm starting to build something that looks more like what I expect to see on a mobile device. We can do text align center. And now we center these links. So now when somebody clicks on these, now they are links that they can click on. And notice that this has not affected our regular web page. It is only affecting the mobile design. All right, I need to fix some things. And what you'll notice is in my text, when I actually described it originally, it was supposed to be, if it's a full size, I get the links on the left. So full size browser window means I get a 2-column view. If it's between 480 pixels and 1024 pixels wide, then the link should be above in line. So they should be side by side. If it's a mobile device less than 480 pixels, then the link should be above on top of each other like this. So the one that I need to fix is going to be where the width of the screen is less than 768. So this right now is going to be my full size with the links on the left. But I want to make it where if it's a skinny page, I want the links to go across the top. So I'm going to need to fix that. So let's go back to our responsive view. And we're going to set this to 768. And if you notice right now, 768 goes back to the full size view, which I don't want because that shows the picture off the side. So to fix this, what I am going to do is I'm going to make the one that says screen, I'm going to change it just a little bit. So I'm going to say only screen, and then min width is going to be 481 pixels, and max width is going to be 1024 pixels. So now what this will do is if my page is between those two values, then it will display the screen.css. So screen.css right now has my 2-column view. All right, so if I put it in between the two, then it gets this kind of view. If I go back to responsive design, I still get this. Now the reason for it is that I have specified all of this in screen.css. Well, I don't necessarily want this. I want it to be in this view here. To fix this, I'm going to take the stuff that is in screen.css right now, and I am going to put that in all.css. Okay, so now what this means is that every page is going to have something that overrides this. So if I am in print, I need something to override nav. Okay, so nav is going to be display none. Well, that doesn't show up at all, so we don't have to worry about it. Content in print is margin left is 110 pixels, and the thing with the content is that it's going to be in a little bit, so I don't want that to happen. So what I can do here is I can say content, and then content's margin left is going to be inherit, just like we did with the mobile page. All right, so then I also need to do something with the tree. The tree, we can go ahead and let that float to the right in the print. So that way our print is okay. Let's make sure this still shows up right. All right, so we have our tree, we have our list here, and we no longer have our nav up the top. Okay, so I'm going to go back to screen.css, and screen.css is going to be if the screen is too skinny. So I no longer want to have this floated to the top, or to the left. I want it floated on top. So I'm going to say none. And then its width, I want to set its width to actually inherit. So that way it gets the full width. Okay, the content area, I want this to have inherit also, because I don't want it to be indented. And the tree can still float to the right. Okay, so if I refresh the page, I get my links back like this again. Okay, so now what I want to do though is I want to make it where if I have a nav UL, I want the line items to be displayed in line instead of a block element like this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in here if it's in the nav area and it's a line item, then we're going to display it in line. There we go. Okay, so now I have home, about us, fac, and then contact us. And so now what I can do is I can even go like I did before, and I could say that this is going to be our, I can display it as a block, I can center it on the page, But now what happens is depending on the size of the page will dictate which view I get. So here's my 768 gets this view. If I go to a 1280, we get this kind of view. So now what I've done is I've actually broken this because in all.css, I haven't saved it. There we go. So now we get that kind of view. And all we've done is just simply defined that based on the size of the screen will dictate the way that this actually gets displayed to us. So one HTML file and separate CSS files based on the media that is used to be able to generate different views. So now what this does for me is I can reuse these CSS files for multiple HTML documents, and I no longer have to make a separate document for my tablets and a separate one for my mobile devices. I make one HTML document. It works for all of my media formats. In this lesson, you learned about what responsive design is, how to include one HTML element in multiple classes, different media formats, how to hide information on different media, and how to change the page layout depending on the screen size.